Eren Hale's knees burned against the metal floor. T-energy cuffs bit into his wrists, locked behind his back, and the cold air of the Altarian detention center carried a scent like ozone and something organic he couldn't name. He kept his breathing steady, his face neutral, even as the tall, blue-skinned official read the charges in a voice that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Reconnaissance Specialist Eren Hale of Earth, unauthorized entry into restricted Altarian territory, espionage against the sovereign Altarian dominion, violation of Interspecies Treaty Code 5591. The official paused, his silver eyes narrowing. Behind him, two guards stood motionless, their weapons humming with contained energy. Eren had studied Altarian military structure during training. He knew what those weapons could do to human tissue. The penalty, the official continued, is death by neural dissolution, alternatively permanent servitude to the Dominion. Eren's jaw tightened. The mission had fractured the moment his stealth craft malfunctioned near Altaria's atmosphere. A simple data-gathering operation, they'd called it, routine surveillance. Now he was kneeling in an alien court, facing execution, and Earth's diplomatic corps wouldn't even acknowledge his existence. "Go to hell," Eren said quietly. A guard's hand slammed between his shoulder blades, forcing him forward. His forehead nearly touched the floor. The official's expression didn't change. "Your defiance is noted. However, your death would constitute a breach of the Terran-Altarian non-aggression pact. The consequences would extend beyond your individual fate. Earth's colonies on Proxima Centauri would become vulnerable to restructuring." Eren's blood went cold. They were threatening civilians, thousands of families who had nothing to do with military operations. "There is perhaps a third option." The voice came from behind the official, low, precise, with a melodic quality that cut through the chamber's harsh acoustics. The guards straightened immediately. Even the official stepped aside, his posture shifting to deference. A woman emerged from the shadows. Eren looked up despite himself. She was Altarian, that much was obvious from the blue-silver sheen of her skin and the pointed shape of her ears. But unlike the others whose skin ranged from pale turquoise to deep azure, hers had a distinctive silvery quality that caught the light. Her white hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face. The uniform she wore was dark, almost black, with insignia Eren recognized from intelligence briefings. A general, not just any general. General Kaeva Saren, the official acknowledged with a bow. The name struck Eren like a physical blow. Kaeva Saren, the strategist who had led Altarian forces during the Orion conflict. The woman who had outmaneuvered Earth's best tactical minds for 3 months straight, forcing a stalemate when Earth should have been annihilated. She approached Eren with measured steps, her movements economical and precise. Up close, he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the subtle weathering that spoke of age. Intelligence reports had estimated her at 63, ancient by human standards but merely mature for the long-lived Altarians. "I invoke the right of clemency," she announced, her gaze never leaving Eren's face. The official, Administrator Tavin Krell, Eren remembered from the initial proceedings, looked startled. "General, this is highly irregular." "I am aware of our laws, Administrator." Her tone allowed no argument. "The right of clemency permits any citizen of appropriate rank to claim responsibility for an offender through formal union. I claim this human." Eren's mind stalled. What does that mean? Kaeva's expression remained neutral. "It means I am offering to marry you under Altarian law. This would spare your life and prevent interspecies conflict." "Marry?" Eren couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "I don't even know you." "You know enough," she replied. "I am offering you life instead of death. Your alternatives are neural dissolution or slavery. Choose." Eren looked around the chamber. Armed guards, locked doors. The cold, calculating eyes of this alien general who was old enough to be his mother. Older. "What kind of marriage?" he asked, adding how his voice sounded. "A legal one. You would live in my household. You would be afforded protections under Altarian law. You would not be a prisoner, but neither would you be free to leave the planet." "And what do you get out of this?" Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. "That is my concern." Administrator Krell cleared his throat. "The human must decide now, General. The execution protocols are prepared." Eren closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of his family, of the colonies that might suffer if he chose death. He thought of the future he'd planned, the freedom he'd taken for granted. All of it gone. "Fine," he said, the word tasting like ash. "I accept." Kaeva nodded once. "Remove his restraints. He is now under my protection." As the energy cuffs deactivated, Eren rubbed his wrists, glaring at the woman who had just become his wife. She was 33 years older than him, an alien, a general who had killed Earth soldiers during the war. This wasn't a marriage. This was another form of prison. "Come," Kaeva said, turning toward the exit. "We leave immediately." Eren followed, his jaw clenched, his shoulders squared despite the defeat burning in his chest. He would survive this. He would find a way out. He had to. The transport took them away from the gleaming towers of the Altarian capital and into rugged highlands. Eren watched through the viewport as urban sprawl gave way to forests of strange silver-barked trees with bioluminescent leaves that pulsed faintly in the fading light. The landscape was beautiful in an alien way, but Eren refused to acknowledge it. When they arrived, Eren was surprised. He'd expected a fortress or a sprawling estate befitting a high-ranking general. Instead, Kaeva's home was a modest structure of stone and translucent panels, built into a cliff face overlooking a vast valley. The architecture seemed to grow from the rock itself, organic and deliberate. "This will be your home now," Kaeva said as they entered. Her voice remained formal, distant. "You will find your quarters adequately furnished." The interior was sparse but elegant. Curved walls, minimal furniture, and plants integrated into the structure itself. There was a loneliness to the place, Eren thought, a silence that felt intentional. "Where are your servants?" Eren asked. "Security." "I have none. I prefer solitude." Eren frowned. "A general of your rank living alone out here, that doesn't make sense." Kaeva's silver-blue eyes flashed. "You would do well to remember your position. You are here because I chose to save your life. That does not entitle you to question me." She led him to a room that was, he had to admit, surprisingly comfortable. The bed was sized for a human frame. There were even some furnishings that looked Earth standard. "The environmental controls are here," Kaeva indicated a panel on the wall. "Adjust them as needed. There is a nutrition station in the common area. I have programmed it with human-compatible options." "How considerate," Eren said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Planning to keep your pet human well-fed." For a moment something crossed her face. Not anger, but something more complex. Then it vanished, replaced by her usual mask. "Rest," she said. "Tomorrow we will establish the parameters of our arrangement." After she left, Eren explored. The room was comfortable but secure, no obvious weaknesses in the walls. The window overlooked a sheer drop. The door wasn't locked, which surprised him. He ventured out, moving silently through the house. He found Kaeva in a study, surrounded by holographic displays showing military formations and personnel files. She didn't notice him, and in that unguarded moment, her face showed a weariness that aged her beyond her years. Eren retreated before she spotted him and continued exploring. Most rooms were as minimalist as the entrance, but one chamber caught his attention, a room filled with artifacts that were distinctly non-Altarian. Some were human in origin. Eren examined them carefully. A vintage Earth compass, books printed on actual paper, a collection of old music recordings. Why would an Altarian general collect human artifacts? By nightfall, Eren had made his decision. The house might not have obvious security, but he'd rather die trying to escape than live as a trophy husband. He waited until the house fell silent. Altaria's sun had set, replaced by 3 moons that bathed the landscape in purple light. Eren slipped out through a rear exit that opened without resistance. Too easy, he thought, but pressed forward anyway. The night air hit him like a wall, colder than expected, carrying scents that made his head swim. He pushed toward the tree line, toward the silver forest. He'd made it perhaps 50 meters when the ground beneath his feet began to shift. What he'd taken for solid earth suddenly liquefied, becoming viscous, clinging to his boots. Each step became harder until he was effectively immobilized. The reactive soil responds to unfamiliar biological signatures. Kaeva's voice came from behind him. Eren turned as best he could. She stood on a path of stable ground, wearing a simple robe, her white hair loose around her shoulders. Without her uniform, she looked different. Still alien, still older, but somehow more human. A defense mechanism, she continued, not a trap, though the distinction matters little to you at the moment. Did you really think I wouldn't try? Eren asked. I anticipated it, she replied, worth a shot. To his surprise, Kaeva approached, stepping onto the reactive soil which remained solid beneath her feet. She extended a hand. Come, before the cold affects you. Human physiology is poorly suited to Altarian nights. Eren hesitated, then took her hand. Her skin was warmer than he'd expected, almost feverish. She pulled him free with surprising strength. Why aren't you angry? He asked as they walked back. Anger would be illogical. You acted as any captured being would. Inside, she led him not back to his room but to a central chamber where a heating element glowed softly. Sit, she said, gesturing to a cushioned platform. You need warmth. Eren obeyed, too cold to argue. Kaeva disappeared briefly, returning with a steaming cup of something that smelled faintly like cinnamon. Drink, it will help regulate your temperature. He took a cautious sip. It was sweet and spicy with an herbal aftertaste, not unpleasant. Why do you live alone? Eren asked suddenly. Why are there no other Altarians here? Kaeva was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Because they fear me, she said finally. Or they hate me, sometimes both. You're a war hero. I am a necessary evil, she corrected. I won battles they needed won, using methods they prefer not to acknowledge. For the first time, Eren saw past the cold exterior to something raw underneath. Isolation, perhaps even pain. So this marriage, he ventured, it wasn't just about saving me, was it? Her silver-blue eyes met his. No, she admitted, it was not. Morning on Altaria brought a strange copper-tinted light that filtered through Eren's window. He'd slept poorly, his mind replaying Kaeva's words. It was not just about saving you. He found her in an open courtyard at the center of the house, performing what appeared to be martial exercises. Her movements were fluid yet precise, like water flowing through predetermined channels. Without her uniform, dressed in a simple gray tunic and leggings, she seemed less imposing, though no less alien. She finished a complex sequence before acknowledging him. You slept inadequately. How could you tell? Human physiology is transparent. Your capillaries dilate beneath the eyes when fatigued. Eren leaned against a pillar. So you've studied humans. I have studied many species. It is necessary for effective command. And what have you learned about us? Kaeva considered him with those unsettling silver-blue eyes. That you are contradictory creatures, physically weaker than many species, yet inexplicably resilient, technologically primitive, yet advancing at rates that alarm the Galactic Council, emotional to a fault, yet capable of rationality that surprises even Altarian logicians. Is that a compliment or an insult? Neither, it is observation. She gestured to a low table where a simple breakfast awaited. Join me. Eren hesitated, then sat across from her. The food was unfamiliar but not unpleasant, something like fruit with the consistency of cooked grain. "I have a proposal," Kaeva said after they'd eaten in silence. "An exchange. I will teach you what you need to survive on Altaria, our customs, defenses, social structures. In return, you will share your knowledge of human tactics and culture." Eren set down his utensil. "Why would you want that? Your people clearly have the technological advantage." "Technology is not everything," she replied. "During the Orion conflict, your Earth forces were outgunned and surrounded. By all calculations, you should have been annihilated within days. Yet we held for 3 months and forced a stalemate," Eren finished. Kaeva nodded. "It defied all strategic models. I wish to understand how." There was something she wasn't saying, some deeper motivation. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Simply an opportunity for mutual benefit. You are here indefinitely. Would you prefer to remain ignorant of your new world?" Eren studied her. "Fine, but I have conditions. I want access to communications, to contact Earth and let them know I'm alive." "Impossible," she said immediately. "The Dominion monitors all outgoing transmissions. Your presence here is politically sensitive." "Then I want freedom to move around the property, without the soil trying to eat me." "Granted, I will program the defense systems to recognize your biometric signature." "And I want the truth," Eren added, "about why you really married me." Kaeva's expression hardened. "That is not part of our exchange." "Then no deal." They stared at each other across the table, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Kaeva inclined her head slightly. "Very well, one truth for one truth, a fair exchange." "You first," Eren insisted. Kaeva set down her cup with deliberate care. "I married you because I needed a human perspective that was not filtered through Dominion intelligence. Our leadership has made miscalculations regarding your species. These could lead to costly errors." "You're using me to spy on humanity." "I am using you to understand humanity," she corrected. "There is a difference. Now your truth. Why did you accept this marriage when death might have been the cleaner choice for a soldier?" The question caught him off guard. He'd expected something about Earth's defenses. He considered lying, then decided on honesty. "I'm not ready to die, and I thought maybe, eventually, I could escape." "Honesty," she noted with approval, "rare in a captive." "I'm not a captive, I'm a husband," Eren replied with bitter sarcasm. "Indeed," she rose from the table. "Our first lesson begins now, come." She led him to a room with walls that seemed to shift and change, displaying three-dimensional maps and diagrams. "This is a teaching space. Today, I will show you the reactive defenses of Altaria, not just my estate, but the planet itself. In return, you will explain how Earth forces maintained supply lines during the Orion blockade." For the next several hours, they exchanged information. Kaeva was a precise, thorough teacher, explaining the biological defenses that permeated Altarian architecture. Eren found himself reluctantly impressed by her intelligence and clarity. When his turn came, he was guarded at first, but soon found himself engaged in explaining the improvised tactics that had kept Earth's colonies supplied during the conflict. "We called it the Mosquito Protocol," he explained, using the holographic interface to illustrate. "Instead of large supply ships, we used thousands of micro-vessels, each carrying minimal cargo. Most got through because they weren't worth the energy to target." "Inefficient," Kaeva observed. "But effective," Eren countered. "Your blockade was designed to stop warships and freighters, not swarms of delivery drones." "A strategy born of desperation," she noted, "yet elegant in its simplicity." Was that admiration in her voice? Eren couldn't be sure, but for a moment the cold general seemed genuinely intrigued. As they concluded the lesson, Kaeva paused at the doorway. "You are an adequate instructor, Eren Hale." Coming from her, he suspected this was high praise. You're not so bad yourself, General. Kaeva, she corrected. In this house between us, I am simply Kaeva. It was a small concession, but somehow significant. Their knowledge exchange continued over the next several days. Eren found himself grudgingly impressed by Kaeva's tactical mind and her willingness to share information. For her part, she seemed genuinely fascinated by human adaptability. On the fifth day, Kaeva announced a change to their routine. The Lunar Convergence Festival begins tomorrow, she said as they concluded their morning session. As my spouse, you will be expected to attend. Eren raised an eyebrow. I thought you lived in isolation. Suddenly we're going to a party. It is not a party, she corrected, her tone suggesting the word offended her. It is a sacred tradition marking the alignment of our 3 moons. Attendance is mandatory for all citizens of rank. And if I refuse, it would be noted. Questions would be asked about the legitimacy of our union. Eren understood the implication. Their arrangement would be scrutinized, potentially endangering them both. Fine. What do I need to know? Much. We will begin your cultural instruction immediately. She led him to a wardrobe chamber with various Altarian garments displayed on illuminated panels. You will need appropriate attire. As a scanning beam swept over his body, Eren noticed something on a shelf behind Kaeva, a small metal object that looked distinctly human in design. Is that a pocket watch? He asked, moving closer. Kaeva stiffened almost imperceptibly. It is an Earth timepiece. Yes. Eren picked it up, turning it over in his hand. The silver case was tarnished but intact. When he opened it, the mechanism still ticked. But what froze him in place was the inscription inside the cover. To Jonathan Hale for valor beyond duty. Earth Defense Force, 2187. This belonged to my grandfather, Eren whispered, looking up at Kaeva with shock. How the hell do you have it? For the first time since he'd met her, Kaeva appeared genuinely discomposed. She took a step back, her silver-blue eyes widening slightly. You are Jonathan Hale's descendant. His grandson. He disappeared during a reconnaissance mission to the Altarian system 30 years ago. His ship was reported lost with all hands. Eren's fingers tightened around the watch. What is this doing here? Did you kill him? Anger flashed across Kaeva's face, real emotion breaking through her composed exterior. I did not kill him. I saved him. She moved to a wall panel and pressed her palm against it. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a collection of Earth artifacts far more extensive than Eren had glimpsed before. Photos, books, even military insignia from Earth's defense forces. 30 years ago, I commanded a border patrol that intercepted a damaged Earth vessel, she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. The pilot was injured but alive. By Dominion law, I should have executed him as an intruder. But you didn't, Eren said, realization dawning. No, I brought him here, healed him. He stayed for nearly a year while I arranged his covert return to Earth space. She touched one of the photos. A much younger Kaeva standing beside a man Eren instantly recognized from family albums. He gave me that watch as gratitude. Eren's mind reeled. That's why you have all these human things. That's why you saved me. When I saw your name in the detention report, I suspected a connection. The genetic scan confirmed it. She met his eyes directly. I owed Jonathan Hale a debt. I have repaid it by saving his bloodline. The revelation hung between them, altering everything Eren thought he knew about his situation. Kaeva hadn't randomly selected him. There was history here, a connection that predated their meeting. My grandfather never spoke about what happened during that missing year, Eren said slowly. He came back changed, according to my father, more thoughtful about alien cultures, less willing to accept the military's view that all non-humans were potential threats. He was a remarkable man, Kaeva said. Adaptable, intelligent, he taught me much about humanity. There was something in her voice when she spoke of his grandfather, a warmth that contradicted everything Eren had assumed about her cold nature. Were you and he? Eren left the question hanging. Kaeva's skin flushed a deeper blue. Our species are compatible in many ways, though such unions are forbidden by Dominion law. The implication was clear. Eren found himself strangely affected by this revelation, not disgusted as he might have expected, but intrigued. He looked at Kaeva with new eyes, seeing past the age difference and alien features to the woman who had risked everything to save his grandfather and now him. "The festival tomorrow," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "What exactly happens?" Kaeva seemed grateful for the shift. "It is primarily ceremonial, displays of light art, traditional music, ritual dancing. As my spouse, you will be expected to participate in the bond dance." "I'm not much of a dancer." "It is not complex, it merely requires," she hesitated, "physical synchronicity between partners." The way she said it made Eren suspect there was more to this dance than simple movement. "Then I guess you'd better teach me," he said, his voice dropping lower. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Eren saw Kaeva not as his captor or an alien general, but as a woman, one with depths and desires he was only beginning to understand. The Lunar Convergence Festival was held in the central plaza of the Altarian capital, a vast open space surrounded by towering spires that seemed to pierce the copper sky. Eren felt every eye on him as he and Kaeva arrived, his discomfort only partially masked by the elaborate Altarian formal attire she had provided, a fitted suit of midnight blue material that shifted color subtly with his movements, accented with silver threading that mimicked the patterns on Kaeva's own ceremonial dress. "Remember what I taught you," Kaeva murmured as they approached the gathering. "Speak only when addressed directly. Keep your responses brief. Do not initiate physical contact with anyone but me." "I know," Eren replied under his breath. "I'm not an idiot." "No," she agreed, surprising him. "You are remarkably adaptable, like your grandfather." The comparison sent an unexpected warmth through him. After yesterday's revelation about Jonathan Hale, Eren had spent the night re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about Kaeva. The woman who had saved his grandfather, and possibly loved him, was nothing like the cold general he'd first encountered. A hush fell over the nearest group of Altarians as they approached. Eren recognized Administrator Tavin Krell among them, his thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. "General Kaeva Saren," Krell greeted with a stiff bow, "how unexpected to see you at the convergence, and with your human companion." "Husband," Kaeva corrected firmly, "as recognized by ancient law." Krell's gaze slid to Eren, cold and calculating. "Indeed, how fortunate for him that you invoked such an obscure statute." "The law is the law, Administrator," Kaeva replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Now, if you'll excuse us, the first alignment is about to begin." She guided Eren away with a light touch to his lower back. The contact, even through layers of clothing, sent a jolt through him that he couldn't entirely attribute to nervousness. "He suspects something," Eren whispered. "Krell has always opposed my methods," Kaeva replied. "He believes Altarians should maintain complete separation from other species. Yet here you are married to a human, twice apparently." Kaeva's steps faltered slightly. "Your grandfather and I were never formally bonded. It would have been impossible then. But now, circumstances change, laws evolve, and sometimes," she met his eyes briefly, "sometimes personal convictions outweigh societal expectations." Before Eren could respond, music filled the air, a haunting, resonant sound unlike anything he'd heard on Earth. The crowd moved toward the center of the plaza where three beams of light, silver, copper, and deep purple, intersected above a circular platform. "The first alignment," Kaeva explained. "It represents the beginning of the lunar convergence. We must join the honoring circle." She led him to where other couples were forming a ring around the platform. Eren noticed immediately that they were the object of intense scrutiny. Whispers and pointed looks followed them as they took their place. "They're not happy I'm here," he observed. "Many are not, others are merely curious. Humans are rare on Altaria. And human-Altarian couples rarer still." "Yes," she admitted. The music shifted, becoming more rhythmic. The couples around them began to move in synchronized patterns, not quite dancing as Eren understood it, but a formal, almost ritualistic series of movements. "Follow my lead," Kaeva instructed, taking his hands. Her touch was warm, her fingers surprisingly soft for a military commander. Eren mirrored her movements, grateful for the practice they'd done the previous evening. The steps weren't complex, but they required precise synchronization between partners that felt strangely intimate. As they moved, Eren became aware of a subtle change in the atmosphere. The three beams of light overhead intensified, and with them, a sensation like static electricity seemed to build between him and Kaeva. Each time their hands met, or their bodies aligned in the pattern of the dance, the feeling strengthened. "What's happening?" he whispered during a moment when their faces drew close. "The convergence amplifies bioenergetic fields," she replied, her voice lower than usual. "It is part of the ritual." Eren suddenly understood why she'd been reluctant to explain the full nature of the bond dance. This wasn't just ceremonial movement. It was creating a genuine physical response between them. Each touch now carried an almost electric charge, and he found himself increasingly aware of Kaeva, not as an alien general but as a woman. Her scent, faintly metallic and sweet, the grace of her movements, the unexpected softness of her skin against his. The music intensified, and with it, the dance became more intricate. Partners moved closer, their bodies aligning in ways that mimicked the convergence of the moons overhead. Eren found his heart racing as Kaeva's form pressed against his, her silver-blue eyes locked with his own. "This is more than just a dance, isn't it?" he managed to ask as they turned together. "The convergence celebrates union in all forms," she replied, her voice husky. "Cosmic, spiritual, physical." The implication was clear, and Eren was surprised to find himself responding not with revulsion, but with growing desire. The age difference, the alien nature of her, none of it seemed to matter in this moment. There was only the connection between them, strengthening with each synchronized movement. As the dance reached its crescendo, Eren noticed that other couples were leaving the circle, moving to more private alcoves around the plaza's perimeter. The meaning was unmistakable. "Kaeva," he began, uncertain how to proceed. She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw naked emotion in her eyes. Desire, yes, but also vulnerability. "The ritual does not require completion," she said softly. "We can withdraw." Eren considered their options. They were surrounded by Altarians already suspicious of their union. Withdrawing might confirm those suspicions. But more than that, he realized with surprise, he didn't want to withdraw. "What if I don't want to?" he asked, his voice low. Kaeva's eyes widened slightly, the silvery blue darkening. "Then we would honor the ritual as tradition demands." Around them, the remaining couples were moving in perfect synchronicity, the energy between them palpable. Administrator Krell watched from the edge of the plaza, his suspicious gaze never leaving them. Eren made his decision. Drawing Kaeva closer, he aligned his movements perfectly with hers, embracing the ritual fully. The connection between them surged, and he saw surprise, and then unmistakable pleasure cross her features. "Your quarters or mine," he whispered against her ear. Her answering smile transformed her face, making her look decades younger. "Mine are closer." As they slipped away from the plaza, Eren caught Krell's furious expression. Let him suspect, Eren thought. This was no longer about maintaining appearances. Something had changed between him and Kaeva, something neither of them had expected when this forced marriage began. Eren woke to copper light streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, he was disoriented until memories of the previous night flooded back. The lunar convergence, the bond dance, what followed. He turned to find Kaeva watching him, her silver-blue eyes thoughtful. Her white hair spilled loose across the pillow, making her look softer, younger somehow. "You're starring," he said with a small smile. "Observing," she corrected. "There appears to be a physiological change." Eren frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached out, tracing a finger along his forearm where faint silvery patterns had appeared, patterns that matched the natural markings on her own blue skin. "The convergence bond," she explained. "It sometimes creates a bioenergetic resonance between partners, but it's extremely rare between different species. I've never seen it manifest physically before." Eren examined the delicate patterns. They didn't hurt or itch. In fact, he wouldn't have noticed them if she hadn't pointed them out. "Is it dangerous?" "No," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But it is significant. It suggests a compatibility between us that defies conventional Altarian science." Eren felt an unexpected surge of pride at that. Humans defying alien expectations. It was practically a species trait. "So last night wasn't just the ritual affecting us." Kaeva's skin flushed a deeper blue. "The convergence may have amplified what was already present, but it cannot create what does not exist." The admission hung between them, an acknowledgement that whatever had happened wasn't simply alien biology or ritual magic. There was something real between them, something neither had anticipated. Before Eren could respond, an urgent chime sounded throughout the room. Kaeva was instantly alert, all softness vanishing as she rose and activated a communication panel. "General Kaeva Saren," she answered, her voice once again the cold commander's tone he'd first encountered. "General," came a formal voice, "your presence is required immediately at Central Command, by order of the High Council." "Understood. I will arrive within the hour." As the communication ended, she turned to Eren, her expression grave. "Something has happened." "Krell," Eren guessed. "Possibly. Get dressed. You're coming with me." "Is that wise, if they're already suspicious?" "If they're questioning my loyalty, leaving you unguarded would be a tactical error," she said, already donning her formal uniform. "Besides, the bond markings may provide an unexpected advantage." Eren didn't fully understand, but he dressed quickly in the formal attire from the previous night. As they prepared to leave, Kaeva surprised him by taking his face in her hands and pressing her forehead to his, an Altarian gesture of intimacy he recognized from their cultural lessons. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "know that I do not regret what has grown between us." The journey to Central Command was tense and silent. They arrived to find the massive structure surrounded by additional security forces. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with barely contained hostility as they were escorted to the High Council chamber. Administrator Krell stood before a semicircle of senior Altarian officials, a triumphant gleam in his eyes as Eren and Kaeva entered. "General," Krell said with mock deference, "how good of you to join us, and with your human companion." "My husband," Kaeva corrected firmly, "as recognized under ancient law." "Yes, about that." Krell activated a holographic display. "We've been reviewing your unusual arrangement. It seems the marriage was conducted with remarkable haste, immediately following the human's capture. One might almost suspect ulterior motives." "The law allows for the right of clemency," Kaeva stated. "My motives are irrelevant." "Are they?" Krell turned to the council. "Esteemed members, I submit that General Kaeva Saren has been compromised. This is not her first inappropriate contact with humans. There is evidence she harbored another Earth agent 30 years ago, one Jonathan Hale." Eren felt Kaeva stiffen beside him, but her face remained impassive. "Furthermore," Krell continued, I believe her tactical decisions during the Orion conflict were influenced by this human contamination. She deliberately avoided strategies that would have resulted in total human defeat. One of the council members leaned forward. These are serious accusations, Administrator. What evidence supports them? A full investigation of her residence has revealed numerous Earth artifacts, Krell replied smugly. And more damning, medical scans from last night's convergence show an unprecedented bioenergetic bond has formed between her and this human, proof of contamination. Eren had heard enough. Stepping forward despite Kaeva's warning hand on his arm, he addressed the council directly. With respect, I'd like to speak. The council members exchanged surprised glances. It was clearly unusual for a non-Altarian to address them. The human may speak, the central figure finally said. Eren rolled up his sleeve, displaying the silver markings. You call it contamination. I call it evolution. Yes, General Kaeva Saren saved my grandfather 30 years ago. Yes, she chose to marry me rather than execute me. But have you asked yourselves why? He let the question hang. This bond isn't contamination. It's proof of compatibility. Proof that humans and Altarians aren't as different as you've been led to believe. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Eren pressed his advantage. Administrator Krell claims the general was compromised during the Orion conflict. But consider this. Her strategies prevented a total war that would have decimated both our species. She saw what you couldn't. That cooperation offers more than conquest ever could. Preposterous, Krell sputtered. Humans are primitive, emotional creatures. Exactly, Eren interrupted. We're emotional, we're adaptable. We think outside your rigid structures. And that terrifies you, doesn't it, Administrator? Not because we're a threat, but because we represent change. The council chamber had fallen silent. Even Kaeva was watching him with something like wonder in her eyes. I propose a demonstration, Eren continued boldly. A tactical simulation. Pit your best strategists against a human approach. See for yourselves what General Kaeva already knows, that human thinking can complement Altarian precision, not contaminate it. The council members conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, the central figure spoke. An interesting proposal. General Kaeva, do you support this human suggestion? Kaeva stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Eren. I do, Counselor, and I volunteer to lead the demonstration personally. Very well, the Counselor decided. The simulation will commence immediately. Administrator Krell, you will lead the opposition force. Krell's face contorted with fury, but he bowed stiffly. As the Council commands. As they were led toward the simulation chambers, Kaeva leaned close to Eren. That was either brilliantly strategic or foolishly reckless, she whispered. Maybe both, Eren replied with a grin. Isn't that what you find fascinating about humans? For the first time since he'd known her, Kaeva laughed, a genuine, warm sound that transformed her face. Indeed, perhaps that's why I keep marrying them. The tactical simulation chamber was a vast spherical room lined with neural interface technology that created immersive battle scenarios indistinguishable from reality. Eren had seen similar systems on Earth, but the Altarian version was generations more advanced. The parameters are simple, explained the chief technician, a wiry Altarian with pale blue skin. Each team will command a fleet defending a strategic position against an overwhelming enemy force. Victory is achieved by either destroying the enemy or maintaining your position for the duration of the simulation. Eren and Kaeva stood on one side of the chamber while Krell and his selected officers occupied the other. The High Council members observed from an elevated platform, their expressions carefully neutral. This is madness, Krell sneered. Allowing a human to participate in our military simulations is a breach of security protocols. The Council has authorized it, Kaeva replied calmly. Unless you fear the challenge, Administrator. Krell's face darkened. Prepare to be humiliated, General. And you, human, prepare to see what real Altarian strategy looks like. As the technicians fitted them with neural interfaces, Kaeva leaned close to Eren. Trust your instincts, she whispered. That's what I've always admired about humans, your ability to improvise when logic fails. The simulation activated, and suddenly they were standing on the bridge of an Altarian warship. A tactical display showed their fleet, 12 vessels arranged in a defensive formation around a space station. In the distance, enemy ships approached, nearly 3 times their number. Standard Altarian doctrine would have us form a perimeter defense, Kaeva explained, her voice taking on the clipped efficiency of a field commander, concentrating firepower to maximize efficiency. But they'll just overwhelm us with numbers, Eren observed, studying the tactical display. He noticed a nearby asteroid field, its tumbling rocks creating chaotic sensor shadows. What if we hide half our ships in those asteroids? When they commit to attacking our visible forces, we hit them from behind. Kaeva considered this. An ambush, unorthodox by Altarian standards but potentially effective. They implemented the strategy, repositioning 6 vessels into the asteroid field while maintaining a visible defensive line with the remaining 6. As the battle commenced, Eren noticed something strange. The enemy tactics seemed specifically designed to counter their approach, as if they knew what was coming. Krell's cheating, Eren realized. He's monitoring our communications. Kaeva's eyes narrowed. Then we'll communicate differently. She touched the silver markings on Eren's arm, then her own. The convergence bond. It might allow for more than just physical compatibility. Eren understood immediately. He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between them, that strange resonance that had formed during the lunar convergence. To his amazement, he could sense Kaeva's thoughts, not as words but as tactical impressions. Patterns, intentions, a shared awareness that bypassed language entirely. They began coordinating without speaking, adjusting their strategy moment by moment. Their ships moved in perfect synchronicity, executing maneuvers that combined Altarian precision with human unpredictability. The ambush force struck from the asteroids not when Krell's fleet expected it, but when Eren felt the moment was right, an intuitive decision that no algorithm could have predicted. On the other side of the simulation, Krell grew increasingly frustrated as his advantage disappeared. "Impossible," he shouted. "They can't be communicating. We're jamming all frequencies." The council members leaned forward, clearly intrigued by the unexpected development. As the simulation progressed, Eren sensed something changing in the parameters. The enemy ships were becoming more powerful, their weapons more destructive than the simulation had initially specified. "He's altering the program," Eren communicated through their bond, "trying to force our defeat." "Then we'll change the game entirely," Kaeva responded. Through their mental link, they devised a strategy no Altarian would ever consider, sacrificing half their remaining fleet in what appeared to be a suicidal run directly at the enemy flagship. But as the doomed vessels accelerated, they released their reactor cores at precisely calculated intervals. The cores detonated in a chain reaction that cascaded through the asteroid field, turning thousands of tumbling rocks into high-velocity projectiles. The resulting maelstrom engulfed Krell's entire fleet, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer volume of impacts. When the simulation ended, the chamber returned to normal. The council members were on their feet, their normally impassive faces showing clear astonishment. "Unprecedented," the lead counselor declared. "General Kaeva and the human have demonstrated remarkable tactical synergy." "They cheated," Krell protested, his voice shrill. "They used some form of unauthorized communication." "The only one who cheated was you, Administrator," Eren replied calmly. "You altered the simulation parameters during the exercise. The system logs will confirm it." The chief technician quickly verified Eren's claim, pulling up holographic displays that showed Krell's unauthorized modifications. The counselor's expressions hardened. "This proves nothing," Krell spat, his composure fracturing. "The human is a contaminant. Their entire species is a galactic infection that must be contained before." "Enough!" The lead counselor's voice echoed through the chamber. "Administrator Krell, you are relieved of duty pending investigation into your conduct. Security will escort you to holding." As officers moved to take Krell away, he turned to face the council, his eyes wild. "You're making a mistake. The bond between them, it's unnatural, dangerous. Mark my words, this will bring ruin to the Dominion." The security officers dragged him from the chamber, his protests fading into the distance. The lead counselor turned to Eren and Kaeva. "What we witnessed today cannot be ignored. This bond between you, this ability to communicate and coordinate beyond our understanding, it suggests possibilities we have not considered." Kaeva stepped forward. "Counselors, for decades I have believed that Altaria's isolation has limited our potential. My experience with humans, first with Jonathan Hale and now with Eren, has shown me that our species can complement each other in ways that strengthen us both." The revelation hung in the air. Eren hadn't expected her to admit the truth about his grandfather so openly. "You acknowledge a prior relationship with this human's ancestor?" another counselor asked. "I do," Kaeva replied, her voice steady. 30 years ago, I saved Jonathan Hale's life and brought him to my home. We spent nearly a year together before I arranged his return to Earth space. It was during that time I learned what humans are truly capable of, not the caricatures presented in our intelligence briefings, but the reality of their adaptability, their creativity, their capacity for growth. She placed a hand on Eren's shoulder. "When I learned his grandson faced execution, I invoked clemency not just to repay a debt, but because I believed he represented an opportunity. A chance to prove that cooperation between our species offers more than continued isolation." "A compelling argument," the lead counselor acknowledged. "What would you propose, General?" "A diplomatic mission to Earth," she replied without hesitation. "With Eren as my partner and liaison, it's time we explored formal relations beyond our limited military interactions." The council conferred briefly before the leader spoke again. "Your proposal has merit, General. It will be considered. In the meantime, your marriage to the human Eren Hale is formally recognized and sanctioned by the High Council. The charges against you are dismissed." As they left Central Command, Eren felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But alongside the relief came a dawning realization of what the bond truly meant. "Kaeva," he said as they boarded the transport back to her estate, "that communication we did during the simulation, it wasn't just temporary, was it?" She met his eyes and he saw the answer before she spoke. "No, the convergence bond, once fully manifested, is permanent. We will always be able to sense each other's thoughts and emotions to some degree. The connection cannot be severed." Eren processed this. "So we're linked for life?" "Yes," she searched his face. "Does this disturb you?" He considered the question honestly. Days ago, he would have been horrified at the thought of permanent connection to his alien captor. But now, after everything that had transpired between them, the bond felt less like a prison and more like something else. Something he didn't have words for yet. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm not sorry it happened." Kaeva's relief was palpable through their connection. "Nor am I." Back at the estate, they stood on the balcony overlooking the silver forest. The 3 moons of Altaria were visible in the darkening sky, their convergence complete. "When I was captured," Eren said, "I thought my life was over. I was furious at being forced to marry an alien woman 33 years older than me. I never imagined that you would find compatibility." Kaeva's voice held a warmth that still surprised him. "Respect, perhaps even love," Eren finished, "all of that." She turned to face him fully, her silver-blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Humans," she said with affectionate exasperation, "always defying expectations. It's what makes your species so remarkable." "Is that why you've married two of us now?" Eren teased. Kaeva laughed, that sound he'd grown to cherish. "Perhaps I have a type." She grew serious, taking his hands in hers. "The diplomatic mission to Earth. It won't be easy. There will be resistance on both sides. Humans will see me as the enemy general who nearly destroyed their colonies. Altarians will see you as the contaminant who corrupted their war hero." "Then they'll just have to get used to it," Eren replied confidently. "If a human reconnaissance specialist and an Altarian general can find common ground, there's hope for our species." "More than common ground," Kaeva murmured, drawing closer. "A new beginning." But even as they sealed this promise, Eren felt something through their bond, a shadow of worry, a sense of danger not yet past. Kaeva sensed his concern. "What is it?" she asked. "Krell," Eren said. "He's disgraced, but men like him don't accept defeat. And he's not alone. There are others who think like him." Kaeva nodded slowly. "You're right. We've won a battle, but not the war. There will be those on both Earth and Altaria who will oppose what we represent." Through their bond, Eren felt her determination harden, matching his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The forced marriage that had begun as survival had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. A bond that transcended age, species, and the cold calculations of politics. And perhaps, Eren thought as he held her close, that was exactly what both their worlds needed, proof that connection was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. 3 weeks after the simulation trial, Eren stood in what had become his study, a small room in Kaeva's estate that she'd cleared for his use. Through the window, he watched the silver forest sway in Altaria's perpetual wind, the bioluminescent leaves pulsing in rhythmic patterns that he'd learned to read like weather. A storm was coming. He'd been reviewing intelligence briefings on Earth's political climate, preparing for the diplomatic mission. The news wasn't encouraging. Earth's Colonial Defense Council had responded to the High Council's proposal with what diplomats called cautious interest, and what Eren recognized as barely concealed hostility. They don't trust this. He felt through the bond before he heard Kaeva's footsteps behind him. "No," she agreed, entering the study with 2 cups of the spiced drink he'd grown fond of. "Neither do significant factions within the Dominion. Krell may be imprisoned, but his supporters remain influential." Eren accepted the cup, their fingers brushing. Even that small contact sent awareness through their bond, not overwhelming but present, always present now. He'd grown accustomed to the constant low-level awareness of Kaeva's emotional state, just as she sensed his. "I received a message from my father this morning," Eren said. "Somehow he got it through the official channels." Kaeva sat across from him, her posture attentive. "What did he say?" "He's angry, confused. He wants to know if I'm being coerced, if the marriage is real or just political theater." Eren paused. "He also said that my grandfather left sealed files to be opened only if I ever made contact from Altarian space. Instructions, apparently, about what to do if I met you." Kaeva's surprise rippled through their connection. "Jonathan left instructions about me. He knew you'd try to help if you could. He wrote that you saved his life not just physically, but in every way that mattered, that you taught him to see beyond the propaganda both sides fed their people." Eren met her eyes. "He also wrote that he regretted leaving you, that if circumstances had been different, he would have stayed." Kaeva's composure cracked for just a moment, pain and old longing flashing across her face. "I never told him that I wished the same." "He knew," Eren said gently. "He wrote that he could see it in everything you didn't say." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past settling around them. Finally, Kaeva spoke. "The Council has approved the mission. We depart for Earth in 10 days. They're sending a small diplomatic vessel, minimal crew. We'll be representing Altaria, but we'll be largely on our own. Just us. And two security officers, a pilot and a xenolinguist. She paused. Eren, you should know what we're walking into. Earth's military leadership sees this as a potential trap. Some factions are calling for your court-martial in absentia for collaboration with the enemy. And on this end, there are Altarians who would prefer I suffer an unfortunate accident before we reach Earth space. Eren had expected as much, but hearing it stated plainly still sent a chill through him. So we're walking into a situation where both sides want us to fail. Or worse. Then why are we doing this? Kaeva leaned forward, her silver-blue eyes intense. Because someone must. Because the alternative is continued mistrust, continued isolation, and eventually, another war. Because your grandfather and I proved 30 years ago that our species can understand each other, and you and I have proven it again. That knowledge is dangerous to those who profit from fear, but it's necessary for those who want to survive. Through their bond, Eren felt the depth of her conviction, and underneath it fear, not for herself but for him. She was terrified that bringing him to Earth would put him in danger she couldn't protect him from. I'm not Jonathan, Eren said quietly. You don't have to carry the guilt of what happened to him. He died 5 years ago, Kaeva said, her voice rough. Heart failure according to the intelligence report. A natural death for a human his age. But I've always wondered if the stress of what he experienced here, of having to hide what happened between us, contributed to his decline. You can't know that. No, but I can ensure I don't make the same mistakes with you. She reached across and took his hand. If at any point this becomes too dangerous, too painful, you can withdraw. I will arrange for your safe return to Earth through back channels. No one would blame you. Eren squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together. Even knowing what it costs, what we've both lost. He understood what she was asking. They'd both surrendered things they couldn't reclaim. His freedom to return to his old life. Her carefully maintained isolation. The clear boundaries that had protected them both from vulnerability. Even knowing that, he confirmed. The next 10 days passed in intense preparation. Eren studied Earth's current political landscape, relearning the nuances of human diplomacy he'd taken for granted. Kaeva drilled him on protocol, on how to navigate the inevitable hostility they'd face, on contingency plans if things went catastrophically wrong. But there were quiet moments too. Evenings on the balcony, watching the moons rise. Mornings training together in the courtyard, Kaeva teaching him Altarian combat forms while he showed her human defensive techniques. Nights when the bond between them deepened in ways that had nothing to do with politics or species, and everything to do with two people learning to trust each other completely. On their last evening before departure, Kaeva gave him something, a small device that fit in his palm. A genetic key, she explained, coded to your DNA and mine. If anything happens to me, this will grant you access to everything I own, property, accounts, and more importantly, information. Records of everything Jonathan and I discussed 30 years ago. Everything I've learned about human-Altarian relations. Use it wisely. Nothing's going to happen to you, Eren said, but he took the device. I am 63 years old, Eren. In Altarian terms, that's middle-aged, but I am not young. And we are flying into a situation where assassination is a genuine possibility. She touched his face gently. Promise me that if something happens, you'll continue this work. You'll find others on both sides who believe in what we're trying to build. I promise, but only if you promise the same. She smiled, sad and fond. Agreed. The diplomatic vessel was smaller than Eren expected, barely larger than a civilian transport. The crew was exactly as Kaeva had described. 2 security officers who watched Eren with poorly concealed suspicion, a pilot who spoke only when necessary, and a xenolinguist who seemed genuinely curious about human language patterns. The journey to Earth would take 3 weeks through established hyperspace lanes. 3 weeks in close quarters where every moment would be scrutinized, every interaction analyzed for signs of deception or weakness. The first week was tense. The crew maintained professional distance, though Eren caught them watching him and Kaeva, clearly trying to understand the nature of their relationship. He knew what they were thinking. Was this genuine, or was the human manipulating their general? It was the xenolinguist, a young Altarian named Sela, who finally broke the ice. She approached Eren in the common area one evening while Kaeva was reviewing diplomatic protocols with the pilot. "May I ask you something?" Sela said, her accent thick but her English surprisingly good. "Sure." "The bond you share with the general, is it uncomfortable, having someone always present in your thoughts?" Eren considered the question. At first, yes, it felt invasive, but now, he paused, trying to find the right words. It's like having someone who truly understands you, not just what you say but what you mean, what you feel. There's no hiding, no pretending. That's terrifying and liberating at the same time. And you don't resent being bound to her, given how your union began. "I resented the circumstances," Eren admitted. "I resented being forced into marriage to save my life. But Kaeva herself, no, she gave me a choice when she could have simply let me die, and she's proven over and over that she sees me as an equal, not a possession." Sela nodded thoughtfully. "There are those who say the bond is controlling her, that human pheromones or emotional manipulation has compromised her judgment." "And what do you think?" "I think," Sela said carefully, "that the general is the most disciplined person I've ever known. If she chose this bond, she had reasons that go beyond biology. And watching you both during the simulation trial, I saw something I've never seen before: perfect tactical coordination between different species. That's not manipulation. That's evolution." After that conversation, the crew's attitude shifted subtly. Not quite acceptance, but at least recognition that Eren wasn't simply a security threat or a political pawn. On the 15th day of their journey, alarms blared through the ship. Eren was thrown from his bunk, scrambling to the bridge where Kaeva was already coordinating with the pilot. "Unknown vessel," the pilot reported, his voice tight. "Not broadcasting identification, weapons charged." "Altarian or human?" Kaeva demanded. "Configuration suggests Altarian, but modifications are extensive, possibly a privateer vessel." Through the viewport, Eren saw a ship perhaps twice their size, its hull patchwork and bristling with weapon arrays that definitely weren't standard military issue. "They're hailing us," the communications officer said. "Put them through." The face that appeared on the screen was Altarian but scarred and bitter. "General Saren, how fortuitous. Certain parties would pay handsomely for proof of your death, and the human's capture would be a bonus." "Krell's supporters," Kaeva said quietly. "They're not willing to wait for politics." "Surrender your vessel," the figure continued, "and I'll make your deaths quick. Resist, and I'll deliver the human to Krell's faction alive. I'm told they have creative plans for demonstrating human fragility." Eren felt rage pulse through the bond, not his own but Kaeva's. Pure, cold fury that her own people would stoop to this. "Tactical options?" she asked the pilot. "We can't outrun them. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Our only advantage is that we're more maneuverable." Kaeva turned to Eren. "How did you survive 3 months during the Orion blockade?" "We didn't fight fair," Eren said immediately, understanding what she was asking. "We made them think we were weaker than we were, then struck where they weren't looking." Through the bond, they began coordinating without words. A plan formed between them, risky, requiring precise timing but possible. "Open a channel," Kaeva ordered. "Tell them we're considering their offer. Buy us 3 minutes." As the communications officer stalled their attackers with fake negotiations, Eren and Kaeva worked. The ship had minimal weapons, but it had other systems: emergency thrusters, sensor decoys, even a medical quarantine field that could be repurposed. Now, Kaeva said. The ship seemed to lose power, going dark and tumbling as if suffering catastrophic failure. The privateer vessel approached cautiously, weapons still charged but their guard lowered slightly by the apparent easy victory. They didn't notice the sensor decoys deploying behind them until it was too late. The small devices, designed to confuse medical scans, had been recalibrated to emit a signal that mimicked a Dominion warship's signature. For just a few crucial seconds, the privateer's system screamed warnings about a military cruiser appearing behind them. In those seconds of confusion, Kaeva fired their single defensive weapon, not at the privateer's hull, but at their sensor array. The targeted strike blinded them temporarily. "Full thrust," Eren commanded, and the pilot didn't hesitate. Their ship shot forward, using the privateer's own mass as a shield while they burned hard for the nearest hyperspace jump point. The privateer recovered quickly, firing blindly. But by then they were too far, their engines screaming as they pushed beyond safe limits toward the jump coordinates. They made the jump with seconds to spare, the ship rattling as hyperspace enveloped them. In the aftermath, as emergency systems stabilized and the crew caught their breath, Sela approached Eren and Kaeva on the bridge. "That coordination," she said with something like awe. "I've never seen anything like it. You moved as one mind." "That's exactly what we did," Eren replied, exhausted. "The bond isn't a weakness, it's what saved us." They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system 6 days later, battered but alive. The greeting they received was not warm. 3 Earth Defense Force cruisers immediately locked weapons on them, demanding identification and explanation. It took hours of negotiation before they were grudgingly granted permission to approach Earth. And even then, they were escorted by armed ships with orders to destroy them at the first sign of hostility. As Earth grew larger in the viewport, blue and green and achingly familiar, Eren felt Kaeva's apprehension through the bond. She was entering the heart of what had been enemy territory, placing herself at the mercy of people who had every reason to want her dead. "Thank you," he said quietly, standing beside her as they watched his homeworld approach. "For what?" "For trusting them, for trusting me." She took his hand, their bond a steady warmth between them. "I learned from Jonathan that trust is the only currency that matters between our species. Everything else is just negotiation." The ship docked at the orbital station, and as the airlock opened, Eren saw the reception committee waiting, military officials, diplomats, and in the back, partially hidden, his father. This was where everything would truly begin, not with a forced marriage or a ritual bond, but with the hard work of building something real from the foundation they'd created. It would be messy, complicated, and painful. But standing there with Kaeva beside him, feeling the bond that connected them, Eren realized he wouldn't want it any other way. They stepped forward together into the uncertainty, carrying the hope that 2 species could find common ground, not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple revolutionary act of seeing each other as equally human, equally deserving of understanding. Behind them, Altaria's 3 moons continued their convergence, and ahead, Earth waited with all its complications and possibilities. Between the 2 worlds stood Eren and Kaeva, proof that sometimes the most unlikely bonds become the strongest foundations. And perhaps that was enough to begin changing 2 worlds.